Okay, everyone, hello. I'd like to welcome you to the Wellness Collaborative event today. Today we're going to talk about the Wellness Collaborative, what we've been working on for the last year, along with a very special focus today on sense of belonging. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jennifer McCorston, and I'm the Associate Director of Health Promotion in Campus Wellness, and I'm also the Chair of the Wellness Collaborative. So I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. The neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, whose traditional territories we occupy here at the University of Waterloo, they have a deep understanding of well-being. And for many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, wholeness involves the integration of the spirit through one's natural, emotional, spiritual, and physical development. So the importance of land is fundamental for bringing people together, building community and relationships. So before I hand it over to President Hamdalapur to give opening remarks, I just want to take a moment to discuss the planning of this event and the events happening in society right now. So when we started organizing this event about 6 months ago, obviously things looked very different. We were hoping to do it at Fed Hall, but then of course everyone went virtual, and we thought, more than ever, this would be a great opportunity to bring people together to feel connected during this time of uncertainty. And with Dr. Christine Logel's research today as the keynote speaker on sense of belonging, we thought, again, a really great topic area to talk about how people feel connected and that impact it has on health and wellness and academic success. And then more recently, there's been some very important societal issues, namely anti-Black racism, and that's at the forefront of everyone's mind right now. And for many people on our campus, this has been a time, incredibly emotional time of anger or mourning and advocacy. And so the Wellness Collaborative does acknowledge that well-being is rooted in issues of equity. And we are making a commitment to work with those marginalized groups, those with lived experience, and other partners across campus, including the Equity Office, to address issues of discrimination and systemic racism. So today's conversation about sense of belonging is really just one conversation, and we hope people can take the time to listen and learn, and we hope this event encourages further conversations so that you can take your work back to your office, discuss with your colleagues, and think about how your work and your work of your department can support equity, inclusion, and diversity. However, recognizing that this one event about knowledge and awareness alone is not going to solve the issue of racism. So we do know that there's a lot of hard work that we have ahead of us at the University of Waterloo to address these systemic issues. So please remember during today's event to take care of yourself. If something is triggering or uncomfortable, please reach out for support, whether it's through Campus Wellness or Empower Me, or if you're an employee, reaching out through EAP or occupational health, or you can also reach out to the Equity Office or off-campus resources as well. So right now I'm going to hand it over to President Hamdalapur to provide welcoming remarks for the event.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that so many of you were able to join us. Trying to see some numbers here, but I can't. But nevertheless, as you mentioned, Jennifer, what an important time and opportunity for us to get together. I want to thank you and your team for organizing this event, but also how timely it is that we're having this, even though you had planned this 6 months ago. 6 months ago, our world was a very different world than it is right now. And the importance of belonging, importance of our wellness, importance of our mental health are a lot more important right now than they were before. Not that they weren't important at that time either. I'm really pleased that when we started our campus-wide consultations through our president's task force on student mental health, one of the recommendations was to sign the Okanagan Charter. We did this, and the Campus Wellness Collaborative stemmed out of this signing of that charter, our obligation to become a member of that charter. And I think we've made tremendous progress. Every day I'm working on something every day, whether, when we had our campus filled with our colleagues and students, or right now when I go in, I have to go in certain times because of a variety of reasons. My best friends are the geese wandering around and thinking where all the human beings are. Aside from that, that sense that, you work with your colleagues, you work with people under the same vision, under the same excitement, things that we understand why we do what we do, and all of those things, we still have them, even though we're missing the physical proximity of sharing those with us. We do those in a different way, whether it's 100% effective or not. But let me tell you one thing, which is something that has always remained with me. Many years ago, I was earlier in my career very active in my research and teaching to young kids, and I got involved in an organization called Future View. It was a place where it wasn't even close to where I used to live, an hour drive, but in a community where helping people was the motive. I spent a lot of time negotiating with CN to get their abandoned railway station to be donated to this organization, leased for 99 years for $1, and we took over that railway station. There were people in the community that spent half of their year in hospitals or some sort of mental health organization or under care. And we brought them all into the museum and this place, railway station, and said, we're going to make this a museum, and this is going to be your museum. And from there on, everybody was up early in the morning. They are working on getting the museum ready. And I couldn't tell you the excitement, the sense of belonging. Many of those people never ever went back to where they had spent a lot of time with. That camaraderie, the belonging, the something that they could see that's happening. And when we opened that museum, Railway Museum, I could tell you that without knowing their past fully, but I could easily tell that that was the happiest day in their lives, and the sense of accomplishment and belonging was tremendous. So what we are doing here on campus, I think of it, and many of us, most of us, if not all of us, we either coming to campus doing what we do or doing it remotely, we do it with that sense of belonging. We understand that we don't do what we do in isolation of that, how it's connected to some other things and how it is affecting lives, our own lives, as well as others in a very positive way. So thank you so much. This is a very important event, Jennifer. Again, thank you and your colleagues for organizing that day, and I look forward to hearing Dr. Logan's presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, President Hamdalapper, for your opening remarks and for also reiterating the importance of well-being and wellness and sense of belonging, especially at the University of Waterloo. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Wellness Collaborative 1 year later, and for many of you, you may have been exactly a year ago at the Wellness Collaborative launch event. It was hosted up at Fed Hall, and we had approximately 400 attendees, and that was a time where we did talk about the University of Waterloo's commitment to the Okanagan Charter and the Healthy Workplace Statement and what that meant for us. And we also had Matt Dolph from UBC come and talk about their well-being strategy and how that was advancing the health and well-being of their UBC students and staff. And we also talked about at that event taking a community development approach to well-being, again, celebrating our assets, making sure everyone owned wellness and everyone's wellness was important, and taking this top-down leadership approach plus a bottom-up approach. And so at that event, we officially launched the collaborative as a forum to communicate, coordinate, and collaborate on leveraging our assets, but also identifying some gaps. And so as a follow-up to that event, we asked people, we sent out a survey, and 90% of people wanted to be involved moving forward, which was great. So some of the ways that those people have been involved is we've sent out wellness collaborative newsletters. So we have about 468 subscribers, and we've sent those out throughout the year. And that's really been a chance for people to learn what's happening on and off campus, be connected to training. It's also been a way to highlight our wellness champion stories. So these are individuals on campus, whether they're students, staff, or faculty, that may not have health and wellness directly as part of their job, but are doing this work, and they're basically living out the Okanagan Charter or the Healthy Workplace Statement. And so we wanted to highlight them and inspire others across campus about how they could do the same. And then in addition, we've also formed a community of practice, and they've had about 5 meetings, and there's approximately 100 individuals on that distribution list, and it averages about 45 participants per meeting. And again, this is an opportunity for people to come together to learn about the various wellness programs that are happening, to make sure people aren't duplicating, but actually working more closely together. And there's been a lot of synergy and relationships that have followed out of that. So again, these are continuous opportunities that if you aren't on the newsletter or you want to join the community of practice, by all means, you can do that. And a really important thing that has happened over the last year as well has been the formation of the Wellness Collaborative Advisory Committee. So our executive sponsors are Chris Reed and Marilyn Thompson. So again, representing students and employees. And our first meeting was on August 15th of 2019. And since then we've met monthly. And this group is comprised of 19 stakeholders with various representatives. So seats for undergraduate and graduate students, staff association, faculty association, human resources, and each of the 6 faculties also has a seat as well. So it's a pretty diverse group representing various stakeholder needs. And the mandate of that advisory committee has been to identify priority areas for action by reviewing our University of Waterloo wellness data. And so that's something I'm going to really talk about in a minute, about how we did that and what 5 proposed priority areas we've come up with. And then our next steps really is to engage necessary stakeholders and resources to establish action groups, in addition to developing an accountability framework that monitors performance indicators. So this is something that actually we've already talked about, and it's very difficult because, you know, it's trying to think about, well, what are effective indicators of collaboration and partnership, or effective indicators of coordination? So these are things we're actually working with some researchers across campus to help us develop this accountability framework. In addition, the advisory committee mandate is to develop a communications strategy to make sure our health and wellness priorities and our actions are aligning with other university-wide initiatives, and also to establish University of Waterloo as a leader in health promotion and wellness knowledge exchange. So this is where we're really trying to bring into the fold faculty members who do research in health and well-being, and to learn from them, to highlight this really great work that they're doing both on campus and even internationally, and engage again in knowledge translation. So some of the early work of the advisory committee is that over the last year, it partnered with the library for the Meet and Move Challenge. So that actually was a direct recommendation that came out of last June's event, where people at that event, some of the suggestions were they wanted to see how we could build more physical activity into the day. So we partnered and we developed these guidelines for walking or meeting or moving meetings, and we put those out during Healthy Workplace Month, and we had a challenge. We also did some work to advocate for smoke-free campuses. So this, prior to COVID, we actually had a lot of momentum. We had a small working group. They were looking at the evidence. They put together a proposed recommendation because the smoking policy at the university is up for renewal this year. And we talked to various stakeholder groups, and we were asking for endorsement and support. And then of course, COVID came along, and this is not necessarily a priority right now, but something that we are really going to, hopefully when we get back on campus, continue to advocate and work with our stakeholder groups and the Secretariat around this policy. The other thing that they've done is they've put together for the Presidential Nomination Committee some characteristics and attributes for the next presidential nomination of things that we'd be looking for in terms of characteristics that support health promoting universities. And finally, they've spent the last 8 months identifying the UW's proposed wellness priorities, and I'm going to talk about what that process looked like. So what we did in terms of picking these 5 proposed priority areas was we engaged in what's called an evidence-informed decision-making process. And this is where we took the research evidence, so we looked at best practice and literature, and then we layered that with our local context and data. So we looked at all of our data sources that had health and wellness information at the University of Waterloo. That included National College Health Assessment Survey data, NESE, CUSC, our Employee Engagement Survey, and we took all of that along with looking at the community and political preferences, so looking and combing through the consultation data of the strategic plan, along with what's happening from a health and wellness perspective provincially and nationally, and then we weighed that against existing resources. And those 19 stakeholder groups brought the expertise to look through, as I said, these mounds of data, have really thoughtful decisions, and come up with the 5 proposed priority areas. However, that said, we wanted to make sure we had very clear guiding principles as we came up with those priority areas. So these were things that we felt whatever priority area we came up with had to, in terms of implementing it, we had to make sure we could connect it with other health interventions into the core business of our work, and making sure we take a systems approach. So again, there's lots of other great work happening on campus that is connected, whether that's the new President's Anti-Racism Task Force, the President's Advisory Committee on Student Mental Health, Sustainability, the Equity Office. So we want to make sure that we're connecting those things so that they're going in parallel and not diverging, or we're not duplicating the work that's happening. In addition, a guiding principle when we picked priorities was making sure we're going to be able to take a comprehensive approach. So in continuing to increase knowledge and skills at an individual level is important in public health, but we also want to make sure that we can create supportive environments and change culture and norms, and specifically look at policies as well. In addition, we felt that choosing priority areas, we always had to take that lens of equity, inclusivity, and diversity, and making sure whatever proposed priorities and interventions come out of this work is not serving to continue to increase the inequities, but in fact, we want to be decreasing those inequities and addressing them. And we should be doing that by listening to people with lived experience and listening to those marginalized groups on campus. And then finally, picking priorities, we're going to be taking both a universal and targeted approach. Universal means it affects everyone and we can target everyone, but recognizing, as I said, there are some groups on campus that may need some additional supports and interventions, and working with those groups. So here are the proposed wellness collaborative priority areas. I don't think many of them will surprise you. You've probably seen these touched upon in the strategic plan in other areas. So these include sense of belonging, which we're going to talk about today, mental wellness, spiritual wellness, institutional commitment at all levels to wellness, and supportive environments for active living and healthy eating. So I'm going to briefly just go through these so that people have an idea what we're talking about. I think it's important to recognize the advisory committee has come up with the why. So why are these things important, and what would that look like if we were successful? What are the outcomes we're achieving? But our next step of these potential action groups moving forward is the how. So what are effective interventions at a post-secondary institution to move these along? And that's where we still have some work to do. So why institutional commitment? So we thought, well, this could maybe be an actual guiding principle, or could be interwoven through the other priorities. But the advisory committee felt very strongly that this had to be its own standalone priority because of the importance of having committed leadership, which is needed for culture change, problem solving, and knowledge sharing. And when you have collaborative leadership for wellness, it can build social capital and increase organizational performance and productivity. So what we're hoping to achieve through this, or what would success look like if we achieve this, is that senior leadership are able to articulate what being a health promoting university means, and they can advocate for that, and they can effectively build that into whether it's their faculty plans, department plans, into the work of the employees of their area. But in addition to this top-down leadership, as we've said all along, we need a bottom-up approach where everyone at the university, and there's wide-ranging and meaningful engagement opportunities for people to participate in health and wellness work and build that into their daily job. So we felt this institutional commitment as a proposed priority would help to move our overall goals along. This will come as no surprise that another proposed priority area is mental wellness. Again, there's been 3+ years of the President's Advisory Committee on Student Mental Health and the work of co-SMH, and they're working ahead on those recommendations. So we just wanted to make sure that we continue to identify that mental wellness stays at the forefront and is still important in this work, and creating a supportive campus culture and making sure people have the resources they need. And so when we looked at our data, again, this was 2019 data from NACHA and our employee engagement survey, there was still this disconnect between students who report feeling overwhelming anxiety at 65% when compared to those actually receiving diagnosis and treatment for anxiety at 17%. So we also saw that 44% of our employees and our long-term disability claims were for mental health disorders. So again, we want to continue to shift social norms for help-seeking behaviors. We want to create a UW community where everyone is literate in mental health and can support each other, and also create a strong culture of resilience by both addressing individual personal factors that people can build on, but also external factors that support people in their resiliency. The third one, supportive environments for active living and healthy eating. Now, unfortunately, this is something we didn't have data for staff or employees, but we had some student data. And what we found, and I think this really shocked a lot of the advisory committee, was 8% of students reported usually eating 5 or more fruits and vegetables per day. So really only 8% of students were actually meeting Canada's food guide. And we also found that the Canadian surveys show that almost 40% of students experience some degree of food insecurity. So that really means they don't have enough finances to eat and eat healthy. So we also found that 16% of students reported meeting Canada's physical activity guidelines of 150 minutes per week. And there was a lot of, the literature suggests there's a lot of disparity in physical activity participation by gender, culture, and SES. So what we wanted to say with this proposed priority area is, again, not only providing individual approaches, skill building, knowledge, but really making sure we provide a supportive environment where we have accessible, sustainable, and equitable programs and policies for people to be able to eat healthy, to be active throughout the day. And again, taking this very broad approach to healthy eating, it's not just about what you eat and diet and this culture of again, this diet culture, but also looking at how we eat with others, how that's a social activity, how we can cook together, how we can make sure that we have affordable, accessible dietary food that's appropriate for people's dietary requirements on campus. So that's something that we want to work towards. So spiritual wellness also came up as a proposed priority area, and unfortunately we have no student or employee data on this at all. And so, but the World Health Organization actually names spiritual wellness as part of a holistic vision for wellness and uses the definition, spiritual wellness is where individuals can find purpose and meaning in life. So this may be a little bit different than what some people might traditionally think of as religious affiliation. By all means, religious affiliation might be part of someone's spiritual wellness, but it's broader than that. It's where people can actually find purpose in their life. And so spiritual wellness is already identified in many of the documents that the university has signed off on, including the Okanagan Charter, our U-Waterloo Strat Plan, and also the Indigenous Strategy Working Group recommendations. So I think as a starting point, because we don't know much about what do people want on campus to support their spiritual wellness, what would that look like? I think as a starting point, we're going to start with some investigation and what that means, whether that's data collection, working with other partners on campus to really explore this area further. And then finally, the area that we're here to talk about today is sense of belonging. So again, this wouldn't surprise anyone that, why are we focusing on this? And again, the literature says, the scale and complexity of post-secondary institutions can really result in a sense of fragmentation and disconnection and isolation. And again, systemic barriers can be experienced through racism, discrimination, stereotypes, prejudice, and bias. And these things do have an impact on someone's sense of belonging. So what we found in our data was that approximately 1/4 of graduating students do not feel like they belong at the University of Waterloo, and approximately 1/4 of employees do not feel that everyone is treated fairly, regardless of personal background or characteristics. Now, again, on the flip side, it is great that 75% of people do feel they belong and do feel that they are treated fairly and everyone's personal characteristics are respected, but we still have a significant amount of people that we need to improve and create better supportive environments. So we want to create these responsive environments where we can listen to these concerns and create a caring community, and also continue to foster social connections in terms of sense of belonging. So as I said, those are the 5 proposed priority areas. By all means, if you have questions, you can type those in the chat box. We don't have time today, unfortunately, because we only have an hour and a half to really talk about the proposed priority areas, but we are committed to answering those questions and posting them on our website. So please, if something came up today that you want further clarification about, by all means, put it into the chat box. And our next step really is to connect with experts on and off campus to understand what effective interventions look like for post-secondary institutions. And we think these are probably going to result in action groups. And this, again, we'll be putting out a call to action of, so what departments, what areas, what individuals across campus should be involved in these action groups to move these forward. So that's sort of what I wanted to say today about where the Wellness Collaborative has been and where we're going. But I know probably most of you are here today to actually hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. Christine Logel, about sense of belonging. And so we're really lucky to have her here today. And she's an associate professor at the School of Social Development Studies at Renison University College. And she's also the co-founder and head of research with the College Transition Collaborative based out of Stanford University. So she develops and tests psychological interventions that help foster sense of belonging and growth for students. She increases equity in academic achievement, and she also helps improve the well-being for disadvantaged students. So Dr. Logel actually earned her PhD here at the University of Waterloo, so we're lucky that she stayed on, and we're so fortunate to have her as a faculty member. And she also received the 2018 University of Waterloo Equity Award for her work promoting women's success in STEM fields. So thank you, Dr. Logel. I'm going to hand it over to you to share your wealth of knowledge and research. And again, if you have any questions about Dr. Logel's presentation, please do put those in the chat box, because we have built-in time at the end of Dr. Logel's presentation for her to answer some questions. So I will hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Welcome to our first virtual wellness collaborative. We're all getting used to this new era of being virtual presenters and virtual participants. And on a good day, I think there's a lot to like about this necessary move towards virtual presenting, virtual gathering. I like knowing that because we're not in one of those lecture halls where you have that fold down seat and then you have to pull that fold up desk over your lap. I know you're probably more comfortable than you might be if we were in person. I like picturing all of you watching this from your own homes, maybe with a cat in your lap, sipping a warm drink, which is warm because you can warm it up in your own kitchen anytime you want. Maybe you've got a child occasionally knocking on the door asking for snacks. I picture you wearing yoga pants. Your commute was probably 0 minutes long. And I feel like I have this opportunity to develop a new skill in virtual presenting. Then on other days, I think it feels like we're so far apart. I can't see your faces to read if you're engaged or bored. I can't hear you if you laugh at my jokes. Or worse, I can't hear if I'm being met by awkward silence because my joke is a total bomb. And maybe I'm over-explaining it, and it's just making it worse. And if I could see your faces, I would quickly pivot to a new topic. But I can't, so I might just be digging myself deeper and deeper. So sometimes we all see this situation we're in with physical distancing and the pandemic and think how disconnected we are. It can really feel that way. But then the fact that so many of us arranged our whole day so that we could be here for this wellness collaborative, that shows that we're connected by shared values and support to belonging and inclusivity. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm Christine Logel, and I'm joining you in 2 capacities today. One is as an associate professor of social development studies at Renison. And I'm so grateful to the leadership at Renison and my colleagues for making this work possible and embracing it. My other role is as a co-founder in 2014 and current head of research with the College Transition Collaborative, the CTC, based at Stanford University. In addition to our leadership team and board that you see here, we have 7 full-time staff and dozens of affiliated researchers and partner schools. So we collaborate with higher education institutions to bring a psychological lens to creating higher education environments with the idea of fostering equitable student outcomes by bridging research and practice. With that in mind, so working at a university, we're generally aware that we as staff, as faculty, as leadership have enormous influence over students' academic trajectories. But in times of crisis, like we're facing with the ongoing COVID pandemic and everything that goes with it, the financial strain, the social isolation, the health fears, the unexpected and frankly impossible caregiver responsibilities on some of us. We have, whether we want to or not, even more significant influences over students' broader lives and well-being, far beyond the walls of our now virtual classrooms or offices. And this is particularly relevant because students enter university already asking key questions. They're asking, do I belong here? When I feel lonely or disrespected, does it mean I don't belong? Can I do it? When it's hard, does that mean I can't do it? And their answers to these questions determine how they face challenges as they arise, whether they reach out for support, and this ultimately affects their retention and their academic achievement and very much their well-being. And these answers are especially important for students from structurally disadvantaged groups. Here, we're generally talking about students of color, women in STEM fields where they're underrepresented, first-generation students whose parents did not go to university, students undergoing financial strain. It can additionally affect students with disabilities, college transfer students, LGBTQ+ students, students learning English as additional languages, veterans, mature students, and probably others depending on the particular campus and what that culture is like. And in research, some of it conducted by the College Transition Collaborative and some of it done here at Waterloo and at Renison, finds that the way students answer those questions is critical for their well-being and academic success. Now we're focusing on the belonging piece today, but you can imagine that a sense of whether they can grow and learn and succeed in that environment is going to be very wrapped in to whether they feel like they belong as well. And this particularly matters because some students in particularly are getting very strong messages telling them that they don't belong. These cases we've seen in the past few years where they've gotten media attention of police being called because of people touring a college while Native American, eating while Black, napping while Black, are sending powerful messages about who is seen to belong on campuses. Some students, like students with disabilities, are running into literal as well as figurative barriers to belonging. Some students are getting answers to whether they belong from seeing that the walls of most universities commemorate a past that doesn't look like them. And so overall, students are getting answers to these questions, do I belong, can I do it, all over campus. And I want to show you a really busy slide that probably breaks all sorts of guidelines about how to do a visually ideal PowerPoint presentation. But I honestly think the busyness illustrates the concept here, because what I want to show you is all the different messages they're getting and some of the ways they're getting them. So from faculty in their courses, they're getting messages about do I belong, can I do it, from the way the syllabus is worded, from the way the first day of class lecture is introduced, from messaging when they're handing back grades. From staff, they're getting these messages from all different offices, the financial aid office, the registrar, academic advisors, anyone who's attracting students is having an opportunity to send these messages about whether they belong, whether they can succeed. The campus climate is giving them all sorts of information. If they're observing equity gaps in academic outcomes, if they're observing numeric underrepresentation, where they're looking around and not seeing a lot of people in the students or the staff or the faculty who look like them, if they're observing instances of prejudice on campus. Campus events like orientation, residence dorm activities are powerful signs of the message, do I belong, can I succeed? Institutional communication, students get a lot of emails, everything from the welcome letter to reminder to pay their fees to notification of them put on academic probation. We have projects on all of these, and all of these are ways to answer these questions. Along with the institutional structures like the physical environment, the bureaucratic hurdles that students have to experience, and there are likely many more that we are still building as we do this research. So what this means is that each of these is an opportunity for inadvertently creating what we at CTC call hotspots, places that let inequities creep in because of the effect they have on students' psychological experience, like their sense of belonging or their sense of whether they can succeed there on campus, their sense of whether they're seen by others to belong and to be able to succeed. But each of these is also an opportunity for creating what we at this CTC call bright spots, places that are fostering equity and giving students across all different identities or circumstances that kind of psychological experience that they deserve, that can let them harness their own resilience, tap into the supports offered at the university, and thrive and succeed in the way they're truly capable of doing. So today then, I want to talk about how to foster bright spots for wellness and academic success. And so what we want then for those bright spots is all students across identities to have a sense of belonging. And we do want all students across identities to have a belief that they can learn and grow, and a belief that others see them to belong and that others believe they can learn and grow. And of course, we're focusing on belonging today. The Learn and Grow could be a whole entire other workshop. And this is especially impactful during times of individual or collective crisis. This is when these bright spots can make the biggest difference. So let's talk about sense of belonging. So students who have a sense of belonging in university feel socially connected and supported and respected. They feel like they fit in there. They trust the people at the institution, and they're not worried about being treated as a stereotype. So in this way, a sense of belonging is playing a really important role in equity. But students' sense of belonging, even in a place where they could belong or be seen to belong, can be derailed when they face adversity. For example, they arrive on campus, they do their first midterm, it's the lowest grade they've ever had. Or maybe they find themselves in a class where they don't know each other and they're feeling lonely and don't have anyone to be a lab partner with. And if they think challenges and the belonging uncertainty that can lead to are unique to them or people like them, they can conclude it means they don't belong. If they think challenges and the belonging uncertainty that goes with it are common, then they can conclude that this is this shared experience and it's going to pass. So one way then to bolster a sense of belonging in the face of adversity is with a belonging message that we've developed. The belonging message has 4 parts. It's normal to experience challenges such as lower grades or difficulty making friends in university. It's normal to be uncertain about whether you belong at times. These concerns should pass with time, and there are active steps you can take to feel like you belong. So that's the belonging message. Now one of the ways, and we've done this with the CTC, to convey a belonging message to students is with a reading and writing exercise that they do either before they get to campus or right when they arrive. And this has been done at the University of Waterloo and at Renison. It just generally uses 9 stories drawn from students' real experiences. So we do focus groups and surveys to hear about the adversity students do face at that institution and how that makes them feel about their belonging. And it tells this story: I faced adversity, I questioned my belonging, and then in time things got a little better. Or I reached out and connected myself to people, and that helped. And then importantly, participants reflect on that message in writing where they make it theirs. They link it to things that they've experienced before in their own lives. But there are lots of ways to pass on this message. Now, if we had all day together, I would love to give you my talk about belonging and all the research behind it, because we've conducted focus groups and surveys. We've done lab studies, and we're building on decades of lab studies that others have done. We've done field trials, nationally representative, multi-site field trials, literature reviews. We've had input from university leaders and instructors and staff across North America. But since we have limited time, and considering the goals of the people who've signed up for this experience today, I'm going to do what I've never done before and just ask you to take my word for it, at least for the moment, that this belonging message and a sense of belonging can really matter, including for reducing inequities in academic outcomes and in psychological experiences. I want to keep this more narrowly focused on what we do, but there is a lot of research on the CTC website and on the websites of the affiliated researchers. And one important thing that we've learned from all this research is that the belonging message needs to be true for it to work. In other words, campuses need to be structured so that every student of every identity really can belong. And what we find that tends to mean is that they can make friends, they can find mentors. That turns out to be incredibly important. The instructors and the staff genuinely do care about them. And of course, we've got a ways to go at Waterloo. Of course, we've got structural racism and a number of different systematic and individual inequities on campus. I'm thrilled to see some of these issues becoming front and center right now since the murder of George Floyd and the belated but welcome attention to other deaths of Black people by police. And in my line of work, I get to interact with all the staff and leaders and faculty and students who are working to make this campus somewhere where everyone belongs, working to make it an inclusive place. So I often have probably the most optimistic take on what it could be like. And then again, in order to make this a place where a belonging message will work, it needs to be a place where students who reach out to support will get it. And I think we're close. The Office of Student Success has been both receptive and proactive, working with the CTC and many other groups. And I'm continually impressed with the work they do. I think at UW, a lot of the resources students need are there. So then we need to get ahead of situations that might unintentionally cause students to conclude that they or people like them don't belong or aren't seen to belong, once we've made the campus a place where they can belong. So as we're trying to do that in our day-to-day work and in the work that we do formally on psychological interventions, there's some common misconceptions about conveying this belonging message that adversity is common, belonging concerns are common, they'll pass with time, and there are things you can do agentically to contribute to it. So one misconception is that this is a way of blaming students for having belonging uncertainty. It's very much not trying to put the onus on students to make themselves feel like they belong. The onus is on us at the institution to create a place where they can belong. It's also not about gaslighting their belonging concerns. When we say most belonging concerns are common and most people come to belong, we are not saying that underrepresentation doesn't matter, that prejudice isn't real. There's been a lot of that lately with some of the conversations that have been going on where high-level people are sort of denying systematic deep-rooted racism. And that's not at all what the belonging message is doing. The belonging message is trying to get ahead of situations where they are common concerns, such as, sitting there in class and feeling lost, not knowing what the professor's saying, or not having someone to sit with in the cafeteria, and let them know that those don't mean they don't belong, that those are widely shared and will pass. A belonging message also can't be unrealistically positive or needlessly negative. In the past few years, the idea about this belonging story and belonging message has really spread through the culture. And sometimes it's done really well, like this hashtag We Belong in College organization in the US. I've also seen it done in ways that if we'd been involved, it would have been, we could have, I think, forestalled some of the problems that might have happened. So one elite, highly selective institution made this really great video of students telling their belonging stories and trying to convey this belonging message. But it was so negative. It was student after student talking about how much they struggled to feel like they belonged and how much adversity they faced. And so it backfired when they evaluated it. And I think that's because it gave incoming students a lot of concerns about what they were going to face without talking about how most people can come to address these things. So with that in mind, how can we, those of us who are here at the Wellness Collaborative, contribute to belonging? There are things we can do, even if we work at plant ops and working with students isn't part of our official job description. Even if we're pressed for time because we're balancing research and service with our teaching, even if we're swamped because we're staff members doing one job that really could use 2 people, there are things we can do right now. But what we really want to do ultimately is advocate and work towards changing the institution so that the leaders and the staff and the faculty in all their different roles do have the bandwidth and the mandate to make student psychological experience a priority, especially when it plays such an important role in equity. And so in the meantime, with the constraints we do have, what can we do right now? So for the second half of the talk here, what we talk concretely about what we can do, if I was going to come up with a BuzzFeed style title for it, it would be 4 ways you can support students' sense of belonging. I can't stop thinking about number 3. Maybe it would even be 4 ways you can support students' sense of belonging during individual and collective crises, when it matters the most. Number 3 may surprise you. So let's talk about those. So some of these are drawing from some resources that we have up on the College Transition Collaborative website about supporting students in times of uncertainty and crisis, especially where equity is concerned and their psychological experience. So the first thing is just check in with them. Even under typical circumstances, a check-in email from an instructor or a staff member or someone in administration that they know sends a powerful message: I care about you, you belong here, which of course is important to students' sense of belonging and whether they can succeed. And in times with particular stress and challenge, like this current global crisis, a check-in email could be especially impactful. When all communication is virtual, one of the few ways we can check in is by email. So if you're a course instructor or a course advisor or some other role that works with large numbers of students, a check-in can be meaningful even if it's a mass email sent to a large group of students, like to the entire class section. If you indicate you'll read and respond to individual students' responses. If you can't respond to individual students, perhaps because you work with many hundreds of students, or you yourself are facing overwhelming challenges in this time of crisis yourself, you can link to course advisors and teaching assistants and other student support. The check-in still conveys that you care and they belong. Or you might be someone who only knows 3 students because they worked in your office as co-ops, but you can check in with them and they'll get a boost, and that will help them be able to support their friends. Or maybe they'll mention to their friends, wow, people at UW really care. I've been getting these emails. So this is this small thing, but it contributes to creating a belonging culture in which everyone really does belong. And even if you don't work directly with students, check in with the people who work with students, like your coworkers or colleagues who are frontline staff, because you checking in with them makes them feel like they belong, which in turn can make the students feel that way. So what we're trying to do with something as simple as a check-in is create an overall belonging culture, a culture of care on campus. Another thing that you can do is show that you see them as a whole person. Some of us encounter high numbers of students, so it's more challenging to make each one feel seen. But some research, especially by Eric Smith and Greg Walton at Stanford University, finds that at the core, what students really need to hear for the sort of optimal psychological experience that creates equitable academic outcomes is feeling like they're seen as a whole person. This is even more challenging with online education because you can't see them. But in a focus group recently, I came across something a student said. A student said, with big classes, just because you're just a number doesn't mean they don't care about each number. Students can understand that even professors and staff who have very large groups of students that they see can actually care about each individual student, even if they may not be able to meet them in person. Another way to show students that you see them as a whole person is mentioning other identities and the wider experiences they have in communications with them. So here's some wording I'm going to show you to suggest that we suggest in instructors' class policies, but this could easily be sent out by frontline staff at the university too. So here's some wording we expect, and I can make these slides available if people are interested after. So school life conflict. Many students face obstacles to their education as a result of work or family obligations or unforeseen personal difficulties. If you're experiencing challenge throughout the term that are impacting your ability to succeed, or in your undergraduate career more broadly, please reach out to me or your TA, or this could be, or your advisor or the Student Success Office immediately so that we can work to form a plan for your academic success. This is some wording that we recommend. This can be a course announcement, for example, on Learn, or it could go right in the syllabus. This sort of message can be especially important. This message of showing that you see them as a whole person can be especially important in times of challenge, because this isn't just about being positive. This is about helping students weather genuine adversities, especially in times of crisis. And in focus groups, I've seen students moved to tears by times that a staff member or an instructor has sat down with them and given them some time one-on-one. And this particularly matters if a student has to have a conversation about whether they need to drop a course or whether they need to, take a semester in a different slide into a different version of the program to try to build up their skills again, and how to break that news to them and have that conversation without conveying that they don't belong. So some wording that we recommend is, I want you to be successful here, and I believe that you can be. I'm also noticing that you're really struggling right now. There could be lots of reasons for that. For example, sometimes students struggle with family or work obligations that are taking away time to focus on their classes. Sometimes students are having personal or health issues. So what this is doing here is acknowledging they are a whole person. Sometimes students don't have enough prior exposure to the course material and need to build their skills. In my experience, once students get past immediate struggles and gain more formative skills and knowledge, they can come back and do really well in the class. Can you tell me a bit about what's contributing to your struggle so I can be an ally and help you connect to resources to help? So this is showing you see them as a whole person in solving this particularly academic problem. One tip that we learned from, again, Eric Smith and Greg Walton at Stanford, who've been doing this research on professors and staff seeing people as a whole person, is calling office hours student drop-in hours. So saying something like, come to my student drop-in hours, even if you don't have a specific question, I would like to hear about how you got interested in this subject and what you're hoping to learn. Or you can imagine course advisors or first year experience advisors can say, come to my student drop-in hours. There's lots we can talk about, even if you don't have a specific question. Calling them student drop-in hours instead of office hours turns out to be helpful because students coming out of high school really see the office as a place you go to when you're in trouble. First generation students or students from other cultures sometimes think office hours means that that's a time when the professor is working in their office and should not be bothered. But it turns out in the research that they did, framing office hours in this way as student drop-in hours where you can come even if you don't have a specific question didn't actually increase attendance at office hours, but it had benefits to students all the same. So just knowing that that resource was there didn't mean they even had to take up on it, but they did feel seen and cared for. So you can show them that you see them as a whole person. There's two more to go. One builds a lot back to what we talked about with the belonging messages, which is preventing them from concluding that struggles mean they don't belong. We want them to know that it's normal to have intense emotions and difficulty concentrating during these kind of crises. You can let students know that most students, and if you feel comfortable, most instructors, most staff, most university leaders do feel anxious and frustrated and uncertain in these circumstances. And the stress and the constantly changing information on the news and social media makes it difficult for almost anyone to sustain attention on tasks such as coursework. So some wording that we're starting to recommend now that, again, professors can build right into their syllabus, or this can go in other places like on program websites. Here's some wording we've just been suggesting. This is the American version because a lot of the schools we work with are in the US. Over the past several months, we've experienced both the emergence of the global COVID-19 pandemic and the painful consequences of long endured violence against the Black community in the United States. These events have caused and continue to cause fear, stress, and pain for many members of our community and will continue to impact each of us in various ways throughout the term. Under these circumstances, it's completely normal to feel overwhelmed or anxious, to have difficulty concentrating. I'm committed to continue to work with all of you to create a positive and supportive environment. Throughout the term, if your health or well-being or schoolwork are being impacted by recent events, I encourage you to make use of the resources the university offers, which I've linked below. And you can do this even if you're not in a position to respond to each individual student. If you are, that's even better. Another way to convey that that struggles are normal and not about belonging is to tell your own belonging story, whether it's about your experiences of non-belonging and adversity in university or in another context. A lot of people, when I talk to faculty, tend to have non-belonging experiences from graduate school. Some people, it's when they started their first job. I do entire workshops just on how to tell your belonging story, but I'm going to give you the very short version just by demonstrating a couple of ways to do it. So here's mine that I tell my students on the first day of class. So I was taking financial accounting and business in first year. I was an art student other than that. And a few days before the exam, I cracked open my textbook for the first time. And I guess I hadn't understood how much material was in the textbook that wasn't covered in the lecture. There was a whole new set of material to learn. And as I tried to absorb it, I started getting really concerned and stressed out, wondering if I had what it takes and if I should just drop this class. Maybe I just did not belong in business or accounting classes. And I started crying and I went across the hall. I felt so alone, but I mustered the energy to go across the hall and knock on the door of the girl in the dorm room across the hall. And she opened the door and she was crying too over the same exam. And so we both started laughing and we decided to go door to door along the hallway. And not everyone was crying, but anyone who did have that exam was having doubts about their own abilities at that time and whether they belonged. So that was not remotely the last time that I cried about an impending exam. That was the last time that I thought it was unusual or unique to cry about an exam and to feel like maybe you can't do it. I understood this as a shared experience and not something that meant I didn't belong. Now, there's lots of ways to do that without having to get so personal if that's not your style. Here's an example of wording we recommend that instructors can put on a syllabus, or you could imagine an advisor could put that on a website. I became fascinated by math while going to university. I was intimidated by math at first, and after I got the lowest grade I'd ever had on my first midterm, I wondered if I was cut out for this field. However, I accessed tutoring services and put in some extra hours, and I earned a significantly higher grade on the final. In time, I developed a passion for the subject, even doing a PhD, and I hope to share that passion with you. So this focuses much more on academics, but it gets across the same message. And if you don't even want to tell your own story at all, you can tell other people's belonging stories. The important thing is that it has these factors about how they faced challenge, questioned their belonging, realized it was common, and then the concerns passed with time or with taking steps to reach out. So one thing we sometimes recommend, whether it's in person or an email or an announcements, is a note saying other students' stories. So here's an example of a note that could go up in various places. In previous years, some students have told me that they had hard times during the course when they felt like they weren't doing well and became uncertain about whether they belonged in this class or whether they should change majors. I advise them to hang in there, and in the meantime to access the tutoring center, put in some extra hours studying, and join a study group. A number of these students contacted me later in the year to tell me that now that some time had passed and they'd taken some positive steps, they did feel like they belonged in the major. Notice I'm not saying everybody was fine, but what this message is conveying is that a lot of students do come to feel like they belong. These things do pass the time for a lot of students. Now, the last connecting students with resources. Now, all of you will have thought about this already. So what I want to do actually is just suggest a way to do this, a very small thing we can do when we connect students with resources, because I think their brains are fried by the time they come to us. And I think a minute from us can make a difference between them accessing or not accessing the resources. Because students have told us stories in focus groups about how they would go to their academic advisor who really wanted to help them and would have to say, that's a question for your professor. You've got to talk to your professor. And then they go to the professor and the professor would say, oh, this isn't a professor question. Go see the Office of Student Success. And they feel like they were kind of bounced from place to place. But if that's the case, there are ways to do that for students. Like, instead of saying you'll have to talk to your prof about that, we can say, here's some language you could use when you email your prof about that. And we heard, again, across North America from a lot of academic advisors who do this. They coach their students on how to approach professors so that they'll get a good reception when they go. For the professors themselves, instead of saying try contacting the Student Success Office, they can say, I'm going to send an email to Student Success and CC you so you're in touch. So that saves the student from having to muster up the energy to do it, find the email, figure out what to say, and then reach out with the email. So this one little step to make it a fraction easier for them to contact that resource and connect with it can actually really make a huge difference for them feeling like you care and then being able to use the resource. So then we've reviewed then what we can right now in whatever roles we're in with whatever limited resources we have right now. We can check in with students and with each other, show that we see them as a whole person. We can normalize struggles and show how those don't mean that people can't come to belong. And we can connect them with resources in a way that makes them likely to be able to actually access those resources. And while we're doing all of this, we're advocating and working towards institutional growth and change to make it even more of a place where everyone can belong and everyone can succeed. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to have time to take a few questions. And so I'm going to turn off the share screen. And I believe there's been some questions collecting. So let's see.
Yes. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. This was so great. There have been a lot of really thoughtful questions that have come through while you were presenting. And actually a lot of people have been commenting on how great your slides are and how useful this will be to be able to implement the things that you've taught us today into our practice. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about your research is how transferable it can be to our day-to-day practices. So to start, one of the questions that came through is, can you tell us a bit more about when it's appropriate to share our story of belonging? Should we share it in lectures, in one-on-one interactions with students? And is there a time where maybe we shouldn't share our story of belonging?
Okay, that's a really excellent question. So when and how to share a story is going to depend a lot on you and who you're speaking with. I'm quite open and interpersonally warm, so it does not seem weird to my students for me to suddenly launch into a story about my own life. I think some people wouldn't be comfortable with that, and that discomfort is going to come through. I think we want to be really conscious of the fact that in sharing our own belonging story, we're not trying to suggest, again, that the student's experience isn't valid. So I'm white and I have a lot of other types of privileges. If I'm speaking to a student of color, I don't want to make them think that by telling my own belonging story, I'm negating their experience. I'm not saying like what you're experiencing is exactly the same as what I'm experiencing. I'm saying that going through some challenges and feeling like you don't belong is common and will pass. So I think people need to use their own judgment and just take some time to reflect on what their belonging story is and what they want the students to get from hearing it.
Great, thank you, Christine, for clarifying. Another one that just came in was someone who part of their job on campus is to create a sense of community for new incoming students. And so specifically, they have a question around how to foster a sense of belonging among students in the coming semester, where everything will be online. So part of their job will be creating a sense of community among first-year students in their program who have never been on campus and have never met any staff, faculty, or other students.
Yes, that is something that I think about so often. Was actually the #1 concern I have when it was clear that we were going to be online in the fall. And so I'm really glad that there's people whose whole jobs are to be thinking about that right now. We actually are developing some resources. They won't be at the point they're ready to share, but I can at least give some pointers if someone wants to email me. I can probably write back a quick email. Because what we're thinking is that students still need a chance to connect and to surface the kind of issues and concerns that they have with other students. And there's ways to do that with discussions and small groups where students just get a chance to connect and hear from each other like, yeah, I really find this an upsetting situation and I don't know how I'm going to connect with people. Oh, I feel the same way. And that's where the orientation committee comes in and says, okay, this isn't ideal. We wish this were different. We're not saying this doesn't suck in a lot of ways. That said, here are a bunch of ways that we can still make sure everyone's connecting with each other. Liz, I think you're still muted there.
Thank you. We had a guest at our door, obviously. So you also touched on kind of one of the next questions that came up was, are there any available documents or resources for faculty and staff with information and guidelines of how to foster a sense of belonging on campus? So it sounds like you're working on some, but are there others in existence that we can be sharing through the Wellness Collaborative and through this event?
Yes, there are, and it's true that that's what we're working on, and our goal is ultimately to have those out where everyone can get them. I would say check out our website, collegetransitioncollaborative.org, where we've got some tip sheets on how, especially around fostering a sense of belonging and a sense that they can grow during this crisis that's happening right now. So we have a communications guide and a couple of other things that will help give some pointers on that.
Great. And we have time for probably one more question before we pass it over to Jennifer. What are some actions that need to occur at a policy level to contribute to a sense of belonging? So are you aware of any studies that have investigative interventions or policies to improve the scores on sense of belonging over time?
Right, so that's basically what we do with the College Transition Collaborative. And at first we were doing it with these direct to students interventions where we had them read other students' belonging stories and reflect on them. But the real change has to be in the institution. And so some of the things that we've been talking about here, I think really can make a difference. But what we ultimately need is the resources to be able to give everyone the space and mandate to be able to reach out to students and make them belong, be mentors. We need instructors to have the time that they can say to students, come to my student drop-in hours, and they actually could see every student if they came. And we need time for the academic advisors who just, I've done entire focus groups with them and they just work tirelessly advocating for the students. We need them to have lighter loads of students so that they have time to work with them one-on-one. So I think a lot of what I frequently suggest are things that we can do in this situation we have where we have limited time and we're constrained by our roles, the world we want to really create belonging, and that means to really foster equity, would be one where we have the resources to really put towards that.
Great. And there's actually one question that has gotten a lot of likes, so I think it would be good to kind of check on that one really quickly. And it's relevant to the work of the Wellness Collaborative, because of course the Wellness Collaborative, while student well-being is a large focus, employees in every one of our university community are considered. So one of the questions was, what actions could be implemented in the work environment to contribute to a sense of belonging?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because this has been a lot about students, but belonging matters everywhere. And a lot of times when people reflect on their belonging stories, it's someplace like when they started a new job. And I think making sure people feel like they belong in their departments contributes to a wider belonging culture. So again, I think as new employees are coming in, people can be welcoming them in genuinely and sharing their own stories of how they transitioned into the department. I think people can be checking in with each other. I think a lot of what we're talking about with students very much spreads into how we're treating the people around us, our coworkers, our colleagues, and the people who report to us.
That's great. Thank you, Christine. We'll wrap up the Q&A for now. We've gotten lots of questions about resources, and we will be sharing those through our website following the event, and hopefully we can address any unanswered questions through that as well. Thank you so much, Christine, and I'll pass it back to Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you so much, Christine, for your research. I've seen you speak before, and every time I feel like I walk away hearing something different. So thank you very much for talking about that. So what we did, knowing that Christine was going to be talking about sense of belonging stories, is we've actually created a video that we're going to share now, where we asked University of Waterloo students and staff or employees to share their stories of belonging. And here's what they said. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Faye, to show the video right now. Oh, we may be having some technical difficulties, so maybe we'll just reshare that again, because I don't believe there was any sound. Can we share that again, Yufei?
A time when I felt like I didn't belong was when I was doing my undergraduate degree and my PhD at the University of Waterloo.
I got a feeling that I didn't belong here, as everything seemed strange and I didn't have any friends.
When I was in my first year, coming into university was a really scary time for me. One, because of my accent, and two, because I really felt like I didn't know anyone.
The time where I did not feel that I belonged was during first year. I am an international student and found it initially difficult to transition myself into the culture and society in the university.
New city, new people, different culture. I didn't understand certain references. People didn't understand certain references. We come from different school systems.
I looked at everyone around me. I looked at my friends and new friends I made in my program, and they're all feeling like they're fitting into the program, or at least most of them were.
Things were very different from where I was, physically, socially, culturally, accent-wise, and I was overwhelmed.
Cultural differences and culture made it feel I did not belong.
I saw my impact and I felt I belonged until I didn't.
So I felt a bit lonely and homesick.
I felt a bit isolated and, a bit of an outsider.
I felt really alone and like I didn't belong.
I felt lonely, I missed home, and I felt out of place.
I felt excluded.
I felt like I was the only one.
And I felt trapped.
And I felt really isolated, to put it in one word.
I felt nervous and isolated.
It felt really uncomfortable. I felt like I was in the wrong place.
And since then, I've tried to be better, and it has gotten better. I've had lots of good friendships, lots of good interactions.
I'm glad that I went to residence where I met some really cool people.
About halfway through first term, though, I attended my first Maths Out Council meeting as a first-year rep, and while the meeting itself kind of scared the crap out of me, I ended up meeting a lot of wonderful new people that I got along with really well.
Thankfully, through the residence community, I was able to build relationships with fellow first-year students who then became my roommates for the next 4 years.
But unfortunately, the feeling of not belonging on campus really didn't go away from me. But something positive that came out of all of this was that I realized that I needed a change in my environment.
But then over time, I wasn't afraid to try new things, join different clubs.
It wasn't until I joined the Caribbean Club that I met people who shared similar experiences to me, and these people became not only my friends but like a family on campus.
Being a part of the living learning community helped me meet people with similar interests, people who were like me, international students.
One thing that really helped me during the transition was Waterloo orientation. There was so much school spirit all around, so many students engaged in so many activities. It made you want to be a part of that community.
But what I did is I started to rely on my friends to just be myself, and eventually I kind of found my way.
I got involved with the many activities available on campus, such as intramurals, and I've been participating in intramurals every term that I've been in the university.
I felt more involved, and I realized that taking action and making a change is easier than I thought.
Okay, once again, realized the microphone was muted. So I want to thank all of the students and the staff that shared their stories of belonging and the courage that took to speak about their experience and to speak about the discomfort that they may have faced. And for me, I think the video really highlights the variety of programs and services and supports available at the University of Waterloo that can help to create connections and can help create a sense of belonging. However, we also recognize that this may not always be the case for everyone at the university. So we as a community need to continue to make sure that we provide those supportive environments, as Christine talked about, and we can break down those barriers so that we all belong and so that we can all thrive and be resilient at the University of Waterloo. So now that you've heard about the Wellness Collaborative priorities and the work that they've been doing, and we've heard from Dr. Logel with some key things that we can work on to create sense of belonging, I'm going to hand it over to Chris Reed and Marilyn Thompson as our executive sponsors of the Wellness Collaborative to have some closing remarks.
Hi, thank you, Jennifer. And thank you to you and Melissa and Yufi for giving us this opportunity to have a discussion about wellness at the university. It's really encouraging as I listen to you talk about the progress that's been made over the last year since the Wellness Collaborative was launched in Fed Hall last summer. And so thanks, not just for today, but since that launch, everything that we've been able to accomplish. You mentioned that we have an advisory committee with many stakeholders, and it's really through that collaborative experience that we're able to see more cross-university alignment with the university priorities and embedding wellness and wellness activities in every department's and faculty's operations. Thanks to the person who asked the question about sense of belonging in the workplace, I want to give a shout out to one of those stakeholders, and that's the Staff Association. The Staff Association has taken a lead role in generating that grassroots wellness activities and suggestions. I would encourage anybody to have a look at their website. It's under the Staff Excellence Fund, and they welcome proposals, ideas for how we might be able to embed wellness and belonging into all of our operations. I'm looking forward to the next step and the next phase of this collaborative, reaching out to more people across campus. And in keeping with the theme of sense of belonging, it's more important than ever that we foster this wellness connection. So thanks to you all for participating today.
Thanks for those comments, Marilyn. I won't add too much more, but just you know, as I've listened to the discussion this morning and Christine's presentation, it really does make you reflect on everything that's happened over the past year, as you said, Marilyn. The event last year at this time that Jennifer and several colleagues around campus launched a collaborative with, it was a really impactful event, and I think a lot of us left that day feeling like, okay, we're on a bit of a path here. It'll be really interesting to see how it unfolds, and I think there was a lot of hope. And Marilyn, as you and I have had the opportunity to stay close to this work over the last year, we can see that hope is being fulfilled in so many great ways. And so I want to take the opportunity to thank the members of the collaborative specifically who are working on an ongoing basis to make a difference for the wellness of the community members that we have at the University of Waterloo. Jennifer, one of your comments at the beginning when talking about sense of belonging was that a quarter of our students still don't feel like the University of Waterloo was something that necessarily fit with them. They didn't feel like they belonged when they graduated. And yeah, 75% that means do, but that 25% is, I think, something that we can all kind of rally around and focus on because, as was brought up in the presentation today, it is our responsibility to try and figure out how to make our environment and our community welcoming for all of our members, especially our students. So that's something that I'll leave today with, and I hope the hundreds of people that have gathered to be a part of the discussion today, although not in person, still really important, and really appreciate people taking the time to do it today. And I know everybody will leave with their own takeaways, but for me, that's the big one. So thanks again to you and everybody who helped put on today's event and who are doing the work over the course of the last year and going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Chris and Marilyn, for those words and for your continuing support and advocacy in championing the work of the Wellness Collaborative. So with that said, we've come to the end of our event, and I hope everyone is walking away with something new that they've learned that they can take back to their office and think about how they might use that information. And I also want to remind people that the Wellness Collaborative is owned by everyone. So I ask you to think about how you can continue to stay involved or get involved or join a community of practice or the newsletter or potentially some action group. And following this event, we'll actually be sending out a survey link so you can either give us feedback on the event, or you can share ideas about belonging, or you can actually add your contact details if you'd like to be contacted about some of this preliminary work around sense of belonging. So I'd like to give a special thank you to the Wellness Collaborative Advisory Committee for their hard work over the last year, really naming those priorities, as well as the planning committee for this event. And I'd like to give also a special thank you to Dr. Logel for sharing her research and wealth of knowledge, along with Melissa Patorka for helping to coordinate the event. And thank you to Yufei with IST for helping us get this event off the ground, and for Sid for also creating that video for us. So before you leave, before you run away, we have one last question I'm going to ask you. So I'm going to ask Melissa to share her screen. People potentially have done this in the past. It's called Mentimeter. And so what you're going to do is you can either open a different web browser or you can type it in on your phone. And so you open it up on the internet and you type in www.menti.com. So it's at the top of the slide there. And what you're going to do is you're going to be prompted to enter in a code once you get to that site. And the code is 625468. And I've asked the question, what is one thing that you're going to do today based on what you learned? So are you going to share your ideas with colleagues and have a conversation? Are you going to share your ideas with the supervisor? Are you going to incorporate some of Dr. Logel's research into your work? Are you going to seek out more information about the Wellness Collaborative action groups? Are you going to ask a student or a colleague about their sense of belonging? So you can pick your response there and press submit, and you'll see there's some answers coming in already. So we'll just wait a minute there while people have a chance to put forward some of their answers. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people are talking about incorporating some of Dr. Logal's research, so that will be important. So Melissa and I can commit to making sure that we post on the Wellness Collaborative website links to her work and the work of her colleagues from the College Transition Collaborative. I also see a lot of people are going to share ideas with colleagues and just start a conversation, and a lot of people also talking about even sharing their sense of belonging story, which is great. Because as Christine talked about, I think it's important that we normalize that we all feel this way at some point in our life, and things will pass, but creating that sense of community and connection and caring is about normalizing and supporting other people in their sense of belonging as well. Great. Okay, so thank you everyone. I hope you have a great day. It looks like, at least where I am in Kitchener, it's just started with a downpour. So hopefully you'll have a great rest of the week, and stay tuned for more information to come. So enjoy your day, everyone. Goodbye.